Now, what my video today, I'm posting today is about the Carmichael coal mine in Queensland, the planned Carmichael coal mine. The company that wants to open and operate this mine is Adani, an Indian-based company. Why do they want to open a coal mine? Well, they want to export all the coal to India, which is slated to provide electrical power for 100 million Indians, lifting them out of abject poverty. Instead, what's happened is the mine has been subjected to expensive and vexatious litigation by green activists for years, preventing its startup and costing the owner Adani billions of dollars. This raises the question, who is funding all this anti-coal litigation in Australia? Okay, now where is the planned mine to be? Well, this is Queensland. So Queensland, Australia, so you can see that there's the Surat Basin here, there's the Bowen Basin. These two are large coal fields which have been developed already. And here we've got the very large, enormous Galilee Basin, which is an undeveloped coal area. There's no coal mines in this whole area. And it's very remote, as you can see, very far, hundreds of kilometers from the coast. And what it needs is a new rail line, for example. And there's very good coal in this area, very nice, thick seams of beautiful coal. But there's activists operating. Here's a close-up of the area. Here we've got Rockhampton, Mackay and Townsville. We're just going into the tropics here, so in this area is in the tropics and this area is just south of the tropics. Now that's the Bowen Basin. I used to work in the Bowen Basin in underground coal for a few years as a mining engineer and a ventilation officer. Now I'm a bit old for coal mining, but anyway, I'm not worried about a job for myself in mining, but there is 10,000 jobs promised once this Carmichael mine is opened. And its location will be somewhere around here. This is the Galilee Basin, a large area of untapped coal, which is obviously in Australia, and this mining, if it goes ahead, this mine should be determined by Australians, not by foreigners.
Defend the Galilee!
Now, the party in power in Queensland is the Labour Party, headed by Anastasia Palaszczuk. That's the lady there. And this is the chairman of Adani, Gautam Adani, meeting her in December 2016. You'd think that a Labour Party would be for a massive new project, $16.5 billion project, which will provide up to 10,000 jobs in mining, especially since the CFMEU, the mining union, is so closely aligned to the Labour Party. But Labour is split because they're trying to chase the Green vote in the inner cities of Australia, while at the same time trying to catch the mining people vote in the country. It's like the man who's trying to sit on two chairs, isn't it, at the same time? Of course, the UN sends many people, activists, to Africa and India to try to so-called, inverted commas, help the poor. Along with many Western countries, they send activists as well, and NGOs send many down there as well. Typical of what they do is they give them some jerry cans so they can drink more of their shit-infested water. Or they give them a little tiny solar panel, a joke, so that they can have a little tiny light for a couple of hours in the evening. There's an African woman laughing at this stupid thing that the activists have given her, which has led, of course, to cartoons like this by Bill Leake in The Australian. Indians smashing up solar panels that the UN has given them, and they find that they can't eat them, so they've been tricked. Indians don't want these stupid things like solar panels. They want what they call real electricity, not a tiny light for 2 hours a night. They want real development and real electricity like we have in the West, of course. But they are being prevented from having that by NGOs and many, many Western governments, particularly the EU and the UN. Africans and Indians are a primary target of climate activists. In the words of one African, someone wants to stop the African dream of development. These NGOs frequently lobby against coal-fired electricity for Africans. I cite Bond and Michaels. So keeping Africans in perpetual poverty, groups like Greenpeace provide African villages with a small solar panel which can only power a single light bulb for a few hours, while preventing them the benefits of full development via a reliable mains electricity supply from fossil fuels. Meanwhile, Western governments provide free sterilisation and abortion services to the villagers as they are lectured by NGOs that their populations are growing too fast. Now that was under Obama. Now Trump has stopped this sterilisation and abortion of Africans, which was totally disgusting. This certainly could be objectively viewed as being nothing but a disgusting form of racism or worse. Yet it is well documented that the quickest and best way to rapidly reduce population growth is to quickly develop. I cite Merskeller, Kohler and Billary. Similar things are happening in India. There the locals want full mains electrical power provided through fossil fuels, but multinational NGOs are actively preventing this from happening. I cite Coliguri and Greech. Preventing the start-up of the Indian-owned Carmichael coal mine in Queensland is another clear example of anti-human activities of the green NGOs. If allowed to proceed, this mine would ship all its coal to India, which is slated to provide electrical power for 100 million Indians, lifting them out of abject poverty. Instead, the mine has been subjected to expensive and vexatious litigation by green activists, preventing its start-up for many years and costing the owner, Adani, billions of dollars. This raises the question, who is funding this anti-coal litigation? Mining is a business, the object of which is to make a profit. However, when doing business in modern Australia, mine owners need to not only pay for all their federal taxes, state royalties and adhere to state and federal laws and environmental regulations, but to listen to stakeholder concerns. The local community and stewards of the land, such as Aboriginal groups, especially if they are the traditional owners of the land being mined, will want to be closely involved in the project. A wise management will have regular meetings with these stakeholders. Common but normal concerns raised are noise, airborne pollution, traffic, securing Aboriginal artefacts from destruction, and ground or surface water quality. Mining in a developed country today involves a high level of responsible environmental stewardship. In addition, coal mining can face activism, court action, and long approval delays. A more recent concern is the level of greenhouse gas emissions. Today, concern and action such as litigation against the new Australian mines can often come from overseas actors, and I cite Sullivan and Gleeson. Carmichael mine. A case in point is the planned Adani mine in Queensland, which has passed both state and federal approvals and must comply with 200 environmental conditions to go ahead. I cite the Australian, 2016. The Adani mine in Queensland is a $16 billion project planned to provide 10,000 jobs in Queensland and, importantly, supply enough baseload power in India to pull 100 million of their poor out of poverty. Yet the project is still being delayed by what has been described as vexatious court action and has been for about 6 years. The court action is being partly funded by foreign parties. Links have been found to the green activist group, the Sandler Foundation. I cite the Australian 2016. This well-financed foundation is one of many in the USA, which is very active in climate matters globally. Yet the Sandler Foundation lists as its mission, "We invest in strategic organizations and exceptional leaders that seek to improve the rights, opportunities and well-being of others, especially the most vulnerable and disadvantaged." I cite this straight from the Sandler Foundation website. Now, preventing 100 million poor Indians from getting reliable electricity that will lift them out of grinding poverty hardly seems to be consistent with the stated mission of the Sandler Foundation. The litigation carried out by a small front organisation, the Mackay Conservation Group, I cite Leicester, 2016, financed through an Australian body called the Sunrise Project, a group which in turn is financed by the giant tax-exempt US Sandler Foundation. You won't be surprised to hear is linked to John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign manager. Again, I cite the Australian 2016. Podesta was former President Obama's personal counselor and was associated with the Clinton administration before that. Podesta visited Australia in 2016 and met with the activist groups opposed to Australian coal mining. And specifically, the proposed Carmichael coal mine was targeted. This vexatious legal action has not only kept 100 million of the world's poor in the dark and in poverty, it has held up projects that the Indian government estimates is costing 2 to 3% of India's GDP. Also affected has been the Queensland economy through the loss of royalties, taxes and employment. Now, a US Senate report titled "How a Club of Billionaires and Their Foundations Control the Environmental Movement and Obama's EPA" was published in 2014. I cite the US Senate report dated 2014. This report was published on July 30th, 2014 and details who is involved in funding the environmental movement and why. Overall, the scale of the funding in the climate fight is staggering. Absolutely staggering. Giving USA lists $80,427,810,000 given over the period 2000 to 2012 by foundations, left-wing foundations of course, to green groups. I cite Giving USA 2016. According to the Senate report, the funding surpasses $100 billion during the years 2000 to 2016. $100 billion in funding. It can be fairly said that the general attitude of most, if not all, of the activist groups funded by this money is anti-fossil fuel production, and many are actively opposed to any coal mining at all. And of course, added to this 100 billion, we've just had another 18 billion US dollars from George Soros. Now, John Podesta and his billionaire friend Herbert Sandler have also worked together to found climate activist groups such as the Center for American Progress and Media Matters. Another left-wing billionaire, Soros, advocates against the nation-state and advocates for what he calls open societies and open borders. He heavily funds activist groups and individuals such as Greenpeace, Get Up, Open Societies, the Occupy movement, Move On, Friends of the Earth, anti-police activities, and Black Lives Matter, and the violent activist group Antifa, also the White Helmets in Syria. He also funds the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, President Erdogan of Turkey, Al Gore, Maurice Strong, IPCC, the UNFCCC, and many, many other activist NGOs. Soros is a very busy guy. Under the politics of climate change action, most of the media and almost all academia, the hard left, green activist groups, anarchists, Leninists, Marxists and Maoists, multinational green NGOs, the UN, the EU and many anti-democratic forces all find common cause. Opposing this massive juggernaut of activism are just a handful of retired scientists and a few poorly funded NGOs such as the IPA in Australia and the Heartland in the United States. That is all that is standing between civilization and the anarchy that Soros and his mob represents.